Across America right now, it feels like we're living in two completely different housing markets. In one version of reality, buyers are still fighting over a handful of homes, bidding high just to win anything at all. But in another, a quieter, more dangerous reality, something very different is unfolding. For sale signs are multiplying. Listings are sitting longer. Price cuts are spreading street by street. And slowly, almost invisibly, power is shifting away from sellers. This video lives in that second reality. Using the latest metro housing data heading into 2026, we tracked active listings across the 50 largest U.S. cities. Nationally, inventory is already up over 12% year over year, and that alone is a major shift. But the cities you're about to see aren't just rising. Their inventory is exploding. And when supply surges like this, the entire market changes. Negotiations get tougher. Price reductions become normal. And the psychology flips. From fear of missing out, to fear of overpaying. Today, we're counting down the top U.S. cities where housing inventory has surged the fastest and what it quietly signals about where prices may be headed next. Let's begin. Number 10, San Jose, California. For decades, San Jose has stood as one of the most expensive housing markets in the entire country, a city powered by tech money, booming stock options, and the belief that prices only move in one direction, up. But heading into 2026, that story is starting to crack. Active listings across the San Jose metro are now up more than 21% compared to last year. And in a market where even a modest home can cost a fortune, that kind of jump is a serious warning sign. This isn't happening because people suddenly stopped wanting to live here. It's happening because the math stopped working. Buyers run the numbers after small price cuts and realize the monthly payment still eats up a massive share of their income. Sellers, on the other hand, are still anchored to peak-era values, struggling to accept that higher rates have shrunk the buyer pool. San Jose also has thousands of owners sitting on huge gains from the last decade. When prices were rising, everyone held tight. But when uncertainty creeps in, many rush to list early, hoping to exit before any deeper reset begins. And when large numbers of owners make that decision at the same time, inventory doesn't rise slowly. It swells. Neighborhoods that once felt impossible to buy into suddenly feel crowded with listings. But the real signal isn't just how many homes are for sale. It's how sellers behave. More concessions. More closing credits. More willingness to accept lower offers in the same zip codes that used to spark bidding wars. That's the moment a scarcity-driven market quietly becomes a negotiation-driven one. And San Jose is now firmly in that transition. Number 9, Louisville, Kentucky. Louisville has never been the city that dominates national housing headlines. For years, it built its reputation on being steady, affordable, and relatively insulated from the wild swings seen in coastal markets. A place where families could still buy without stretching to the breaking point. But heading into 2026, that stability is starting to crack. Active listings across the Louisville metro have jumped by roughly 23% year over year. A surge that signals something deeper than normal seasonal movement. This is what happens when both sides of the market finally accept that the frenzy is over. During the boom, homes disappeared in days. Buyers rushed. Inspections were waived. Offers climbed higher just to compete. Now, that urgency is gone. Buyers are slowing down far more than sellers expected. They're touring more homes. They're waiting for the right deal. And they're no longer willing to stretch their finances just to win. Louisville also has a hard affordability ceiling. Even if prices look cheap compared to New York or California, local incomes still have limits, and those limits collide head-on with higher mortgage rates, rising insurance costs, and everyday expenses that weren't this high a few years ago. When buyers hesitate, homes that once sold instantly start sitting. Days on market climb. And as listings linger, more homeowners feel comfortable putting their own properties up for sale, thinking they still have time to cash out. That's when inventory really begins to stack. The next phase is already unfolding. Sellers who must move for jobs, family, or life changes become the first to cut prices. Their neighbors notice and adjust expectations. After a few rounds of reductions, rising inventory stops being just a statistic. It becomes a shift in power. Louisville is quietly entering a period where buyers regain leverage and patience starts paying again. Number 8, Baltimore, Maryland. Baltimore sits in a region where location has always been its biggest advantage. Close to major job centers. Surrounded by hospitals, transit lines, and commuter corridors. A place where buyers could choose between city row homes in nearby suburbs without traveling far. But heading into 2026, something has shifted. Active listings across the Baltimore metro are now up nearly 25% compared to last year. A jump large enough that everyday buyers and agents are already feeling it on the ground. And when inventory rises in a market built on convenience and choice, behavior changes fast. Buyers stop rushing. Instead of jumping on the first acceptable house, they start shopping long-term. They compare neighborhoods. They negotiate harder. They ask for repairs, credits, and better terms. Waiting itself becomes a weapon. Every extra week a home sits quietly pressures the seller. Another force is also coming back into the market: move-up sellers. For years, many homeowners stayed frozen in place, unwilling to give up ultra-low mortgage rates. But as life keeps moving, new jobs, growing families, downsizing, more of them are finally listing. The problem? The buyer pool hasn't doubled with them. More supply is arriving into a market where demand is cautious and payment sensitive. That imbalance is exactly what pushes inventory higher and stretches out how long it takes to close a deal. There's also a value reckoning happening in Baltimore. In today's cost of living environment, buyers are hyper-aware of what feels fairly priced for each block and neighborhood. Homes that feel even slightly out of line with reality can sit untouched for months. Multiply that hesitation across the region, and the market starts feeling heavier, slower, and far more negotiable than it did just a short time ago. Baltimore isn't collapsing. But it is clearly transitioning from speed to selection, from urgency to leverage. Number 7, Boston, Massachusetts. Boston has always been one of the most resilient housing markets in America. Powered by world-class universities, hospitals, finance, and high-paying professional jobs, demand here rarely disappears. Even in slower cycles, inventory has traditionally stayed tight. That's why what's happening heading into 2026 is so important. Active listings across the Boston metro are now up more than 25% year over year. A level of expansion this market almost never sees. And the meaning isn't that people stopped wanting to live in Boston. It's that affordability finally hit its breaking point. Even well-paid, highly educated households can only absorb so much in higher monthly payments. When mortgage rates stay elevated on top of already high prices, buyers don't rush in. They pause. Paused buyers don't clear listings. They sit on the sidelines. They watch. They wait. And while they wait, sellers keep listing. Life doesn't stop just because the market feels awkward. Families still move for schools. Professionals still relocate for careers. Homes keep hitting the market, but fewer are getting absorbed quickly. There's another problem quietly building. Many sellers are still pricing as if it's 2022. They remember bidding wars. They expect instant offers. But buyers are looking at today's payments, not yesterday's price charts. When that gap stays wide, homes sit. Once enough homes sit, price reductions become normal. Once reductions feel normal, buyers learn patience. And once buyers expect better deals, inventory stays elevated. That's how a city that once felt untouchable quietly shifts into a negotiation market. Boston isn't crashing. But the balance of power is clearly changing. Number 6, Indianapolis, Indiana. For years, Indianapolis has been a relocation favorite. Strong job access, major highways, and home prices that look like bargains compared to the coasts. Many people believe that lower prices alone would protect this market from any serious slowdown. But heading into 2026, the data tells a different story. Active listings across the Indianapolis metro are now up nearly 26% year over year. A clear break from the ultra-tight conditions buyers got used to during the boom. And jumps of this size usually mark a turning point. During the hottest years, buyers took almost anything they could get. Dated kitchens didn't matter. Minor repairs were ignored. Homes were grabbed fast because there simply weren't options. Now, options are back. And with options comes selectiveness. Buyers are filtering harder. They're skipping overpriced homes. They're passing on properties that need work. And they're taking their time. That extra time shows up as rising days on market, one of the earliest signs of a market cooling. Indianapolis also has a major supply engine feeding this surge: new construction. Entire suburban communities are being delivered just as existing homeowners decide to list. When new homes and resale homes hit the market together, inventory can climb in months, not years. But demand isn't growing at the same pace. Mortgage rates remain high. Budgets are tighter. And many buyers simply aren't in a rush anymore. This environment starts exposing which neighborhoods were priced on real long-term demand and which were priced on peak optimism. Strong areas may hold up better. Others will have to reprove their value through price cuts and concessions. And as that happens, leverage continues sliding away from sellers toward buyers who now know they have time on their side. Number 5. Raleigh, North Carolina. For most of the past decade, Raleigh has been one of the biggest success stories in American housing. A booming job market. Major universities and research hubs. A constant flow of new residents chasing opportunity and affordability. For a long time, demand seemed endless, strong enough to absorb any new homes that hit the market. But heading into 2026, that assumption is being tested. Active listings across the Raleigh metro have climbed nearly 27% year over year, a jump large enough to change the mood of the market almost overnight. This is what happens when fast growth runs into financial reality. Yes, people still want to move to Raleigh. But wanting to live somewhere doesn't always mean being able to afford today's payments. Mortgage rates remain high. Prices were set during hotter years. And local incomes can only stretch so far. The result is a shrinking pool of buyers who can actually close. You start seeing lots of online interest, but far fewer signed contracts. Raleigh also follows a familiar suburban expansion pattern. Entire neighborhoods of similar homes are hitting the market at the same time. And when buyers can compare nearly identical houses side by side, the frenzy disappears. Comparison kills urgency. Instead of rushing offers, buyers tour multiple properties, negotiate harder, or simply wait for better deals. The bigger risk now is overshoot. If sellers keep listing to lock in gains while closing slow, inventory can stay elevated for months, even years. That's how a growth market quietly transforms into a reset market. Not with one dramatic crash, but through slow, steady pressure where prices bend to meet what households can truly afford. Number 4. Seattle, Washington. Seattle's housing market has always moved in lockstep with high-income jobs. Tech companies. Corporate headquarters. Well-paid professionals willing to stretch for premium homes. For years, that income power kept prices climbing and inventory tight. But heading into 2026, the shift is impossible to ignore. Active listings across the Seattle metro are now up nearly 29% year over year, one of the sharpest increases among major U.S. cities. And in a market where prices were already high, even small changes in confidence hit hard. Buyers aren't disappearing. They're hesitating. Many households can qualify at lower payments, just not at today's elevated levels. When rates stay high and job headlines turn uncertain, buyers step back. Homes that once sold in days now linger for weeks. Weeks turn into months. And every sitting listing quietly adds pressure to the market. There's also a growing standoff happening. Sellers remember bidding wars and all-cash offers. Buyers are thinking about layoffs, remote work shifts, and a softer tech economy. When those two mindsets collide, deals stall. And stalled homes become inventory. Another factor making Seattle especially sensitive is renting. When buying feels risky or overpriced, many would-be buyers simply renew leases. That removes demand from the purchase side while supply keeps rising. The result is exactly what the data now shows. A market that feels slower, heavier, and far more negotiable, especially in higher price ranges that once felt bulletproof. Seattle isn't collapsing. But the leverage has clearly begun shifting. Number 3, Las Vegas, Nevada. Las Vegas has always been a fast-moving housing market. It pulls in investors, second-home buyers, and waves of people relocating from more expensive states. During boom times, that mix makes prices surge quickly. But when the cycle turns, Las Vegas often feels it earlier and harder than most cities. Heading into 2026, active listings across the Las Vegas metro have jumped more than 29% year over year. That kind of increase doesn't happen quietly. It signals real stress building beneath the surface. Here's how it usually unfolds. Builders continue delivering new homes. Investors who bought during the run-up start locking in profits or cutting losses. Owners of vacation homes realize the payments no longer make sense. All of those decisions add supply at the same time. Suddenly, streets that once had one for sale sign now have 5. Meanwhile, buyers are relearning a hard truth. Affordability is about the monthly payment, not the list price. With mortgage rates still high and everyday costs rising, buyers are becoming far more selective. They walk away from homes priced for yesterday. They wait to see how deep price cuts will go. And waiting stretches days on market. More days on market push inventory higher. Higher inventory puts pressure on sellers who are already nervous. Las Vegas is especially sensitive to psychology. Once buyers believe prices might fall, urgency disappears. Bargain hunting replaces bidding wars. That shift feeds on itself: more listings, more reductions, more hesitation. The big question now is whether upcoming buying seasons can absorb this wave of supply. If not, this surge may be the early phase of a deeper market reset. Number 2, Charlotte, North Carolina. Charlotte has been one of the fastest growing cities in the Southeast. Corporate relocations, banking and finance hubs, logistics centers, and a steady flood of new residents looking for opportunity and lower costs than the Northeast or West Coast. For years, that growth kept housing tight. But heading into 2026, the numbers tell a very different story. Active listings across the Charlotte metro have surged more than 30% year over year. One of the largest increases in the entire country. And increases this big usually mean one thing: supply is now outpacing demand. New construction is hitting the market. Resale homes are stacking up. And investors who bought during the run-up are testing whether they can still exit at strong prices. Together, they've created a crowded field of choices for buyers. And that changes everything. Charlotte has many suburban neighborhoods filled with nearly identical homes. When inventory rises in those areas, it becomes pure competition. Buyers walk through multiple houses with the same layout, same size, same features, and simply choose the best deal. Sellers who cling to peak-era prices watch their homes sit. Neighbors who cut first get the contracts. That contrast becomes impossible to ignore. There's also an emotional shift happening. During the boom, sellers expected fast offers above asking. Now, when weeks go by with no activity, some panic and slash prices. Others refuse to budge. The result is a patchwork market where only realistically priced homes move. That's a classic signal of a transition. From a seller-controlled market to a buyer-controlled one. Charlotte is now firmly in that shift. Number 1, Phoenix, Arizona. Phoenix has become almost a textbook example of how fast a housing boom can flip when the numbers stop working. For years, it represented the Sun Belt dream. Endless new communities. Strong migration. Remote workers and retirees pouring in. And prices climbing faster than almost anywhere in the country. It felt unstoppable. But heading into 2026, the story has changed. Active listings across the Phoenix metro have surged more than any other major U.S. market, marking one of the sharpest inventory explosions in the nation. And this didn't happen because people suddenly stopped loving sunshine and space. It happened because affordability finally hit a wall. Mortgage rates stayed high. Property taxes and insurance kept rising. Everyday living costs climbed. Buyers who once stretched to buy homes are now running the numbers and realizing the payments simply don't make sense anymore. When enough buyers pause at the same time that more sellers decide to list, inventory builds fast. Phoenix is also filled with newer subdivisions where homes look nearly identical. In a tight market, that sameness didn't matter, everything sold. In a looser market, it becomes a disadvantage. Buyers can compare similar homes on the same street and choose the one with the lowest price, the biggest credits, or the best concessions. Sellers still anchored to peak-era prices watch their homes sit while realistic neighbors go under contract. There's one more layer that makes Phoenix especially vulnerable. A large share of recent buyers were investors and newcomers who purchased during the run-up. Investors move quickly when returns soften. Newer owners often have less equity to buffer a slowdown. When those groups list at the same time, supply surges even faster. The result? Negotiations tilt toward buyers. Price cuts become normal. And a market that once felt invincible starts looking like one of the clearest examples of a boom turning into a recession.